All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to I believe episode 9 of the After Show. Crazy that we've made it this far. This week with me to unpack this double episode, I have extra guests. We have Eli, Jude, Karina, and Lena. Lena, this is your first appearance on the podcast this season. So please, if you could introduce yourself and give a little update on where you've been at since you played.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Lena. Thank you for having me. This is super fun. I'm excited to discuss all things Survivor. I'm currently living in Mammoth Lakes. I've been working here for the ski season, and it came as a big shock to me that our season of Survivor dropped a couple weeks ago. So it's exciting that it's finally out. Yeah, and I've just been skiing, living life, dropping off the face of the earth, and having a good time. So it's fun to reconnect with UCLAers.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear you've been well. Does anyone else have any updates since the last time they were on the pod? No. Okay. I'll give an update. I'm in New York currently with a fun time. Evan's actually in the other room. So he may make an
Oh,
appearance for a minute later. Um, but yeah, okay. Well, let's jump right into it. This is a crazy episode. And I want to start by talking about loved ones. Lena, honestly, I think like your dynamic with Amir is like one of the most interesting pairs, right? Because you guys end up like winning the challenge together, and then he finds the idol clue and he like reads it to everyone, and you're like, no. That was so funny. So yeah, talk about like what it was like. I mean, the surprise of like seeing someone from like totally outside the game show up, and then also like the dynamic of working together for that day.
Yeah, it was super surprising that that happened, but I was glad that Amir was the person I was gonna be playing with because Amir is one of these people who's just like good at every single thing he does. Like it's literally anything, he's good at it. So I knew when I saw him that we had a good shot of winning that challenge. In retrospect, perhaps I should have thrown that challenge to not make myself so much of a threat, but it seemed like that ship had sailed already. And so yeah, working with him was super fun. I think we're like can be both super intense people. So it was fun to have that intensity together. And then yeah, he read out the clue. Honestly, my knowledge of Survivor while I was playing this was so limited that I genuinely didn't even think of the fact that there was going to be a clue at any point, really, that much. And I didn't think to warn him. And I probably could have told him to stop reading it, but I was just like, oh, okay, clue, I guess. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
fun though.
no, it definitely created an interesting dynamic. Yeah, no, it's so funny the way that like these loved ones can kind of come into play. Jude, what was that like for you? Did you have a similar like positive experience, or were you like, ah, this guy? Like,
no, I was excited. I was super thrown off. I had no idea that you guys even reached out to him. He was my current roommate, and it was really great to see him, especially because he was the one I was talking to every single day about Survivor. So he was getting tired of hearing about it. So it was awesome to get him on the show and actually see what I was doing. And we almost won at one point. It was really great. And then I think we had both sides covered, and we had to restart, and that was really frustrating because I felt like I could have dominated the bouncing the ping pongs and the cups as well. So that's how the game works.
yeah,
Can
no,
I?
that was yeah, go
Oh,
for it.
I was gonna say, can I also just add how we organize the loved ones
Yeah, I was gonna
segment
bring
on
that
a
up. Yeah.
production? Okay, go for it.
Oh no, yeah, I was just gonna say like it was a lot to like find people, reach out to them, coordinate scheduling, and then like I remember I was one of the people who would like met the loved ones and was like waiting with them while like tribal was happening. But yeah, Eli, if you want to talk about what coordinating that was like a
Yeah,
little
I
bit.
mean that was I don't know what the original plan was, but it actually ended up being really like convenient because of the Dunker sort of medevac situation.
Mm,
I remember we sent out like, because this happened, like we want to make sure that if something happens, like while we're filming an episode, like we
Mm.
know
oh yeah.
who your emergency contact is. And so we got everyone to reach out and gave us their like emergency contact. And then we just reached out to those people and be, hey, would you be interested in doing this loved one thing? If not, is there anyone else who you could refer us to? And I think like we basically were able to do all of it through that. And I don't think anyone let anything slip. Think I do think Nia was a last second. I think Annika's person might have like dropped last second. I don't know if there was like a
Yeah,
scheduling
something
thing
came up. Yeah, there was
or
definitely some
something.
dynamic where it was like, oh, do we want someone who played? Like that adds like an interesting
Right.
dynamic, but
Um,
it all worked out. I want
two
to say,
two. Oh, just bonus things is that because of the way we shoot these episodes, right? We do tribal council and then immediately go to the challenge. We also did have Lucas had a loved one who was there,
Yeah.
his girlfriend Julia, who because like she was then there immediately when he got voted out. I do think it made his blind side a little bit easier to handle. And also a bonus is that my mom happened to be there that day, and you can see her in one of the angles. So she did make the episode, and I count that as my loved one. Shout out, mom, love you.
I think Evan mentioned that his parents might have also been there that day. Like, yeah, just a crazy day. But yeah, I also remembered having to adjust that challenge where it was like at first it was too hard, where like not being able to cover either end was like impossible. Like the marbles were just dropping left and right. So we made it so you can cover one end. And that was when you start to see people really like making progress in that challenge. But yeah, so then we go to talking about well, yeah, so Amir reads this clue, and Ryan kind of has this epiphany. And he has this great moment where he like it's kind of the start of like his hero arc, I would say a little bit, where right, like he like has this big moment. Finally he's been in the dumps. People have been after him. His relationships have been like, he lost Lucas, and we see him here kind of get his like full circle moment, where like he gets the idol, he votes out Iman, like definitely a big episode for him
Yeah.
in that sense. Karina, what's your take on Ryan's like kind of arc completion this episode?
Yeah, Ryan, like, not to jump ahead too much, but I'm pretty sure Ryan voted wrong every single round until this episode. And so it was definitely like interesting because I think a lot of people at this point were really used to Ryan being somebody that you could like almost like pick up. Because it was like, well, he's been voting wrong. He's been playing from the bottom the entire game. Like maybe I can pick him up and like drag him to the end a little bit and have him like vote with me a couple times. And then when he eventually like finds this idol, a lot of people are like, wait, now he has power in the game. Like they didn't really know what to do with him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was like a huge thing where there were a lot of moments where like Annika was like, "Oh, I was kind of down to work with Elena and them and Ryan." And I think like Iman as well, they were like kind of trying to pick up these pieces. And then the second that like Ryan starts to find power and he finds this idol and he's finally like voting correctly, he's like kind of like pulls himself out of that position. So I think it was definitely like very poetic that Ryan ends up finding this idol and it kind of like pulls him out and starts him off on a path of like voting correctly, being able to like take out big targets and just like, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
let's jump into the vote here, unless Eli, you had
Oh,
something to say.
yeah, I just want to say about the idol, Ryan finding the idol. Just a interesting thing is that like the way that he read the clue and got it right was like sort of like wrong formula, right answer. Because he
Mm-hmm.
talks about that bit about like the spy sitcom and that being like the Big Bang Theory, mind be all like neuroscience. The spy sitcom is supposed to be the show Archer, and the name of the statue that the idol is at is called the Archer. So it's like just kind of a funny like wrong formula, right answer. It ends up working, but yeah, I also think it's great because Ryan I think has been really like sort of I don't think he's been given a lot of respect by a lot of the cast until this point, and you sort of see that in the previous episode with Annika finally sitting down and talking to him and really like finally bonding with him as a person, maybe not as a player, and then him finally being able to like flip this and sort of become into a power position. It's really satisfying to watch, I think.
Mm. Well, let's talk about this first vote. Lena, you were definitely in an interesting position where, I mean, you were immune. And people were definitely looking at you like as a target. And so there was kind of this plan devised of a split vote. And it's kind of the first time that we kind of see things not really go the way that like the snakes really expect in the merge. So talk a little bit about like what your like thought process was on that vote and like what the kind of like shock factor was like of things not going your way.
Yeah, I think at this point in the game, I was kind of, perhaps my confessionals didn't really reveal it, but I was kind of feeling in over my head. And I didn't exactly know how to accurately strategize. So I was kind of trying to figure out who my allies were. And I think there were a lot of things going on behind the scenes that I was like completely unaware of and possibilities that my mind hadn't even gone to. So I think this is the point in the game where I started to get a little bit confused as where to turn and who to turn to. Um, so the blind side was definitely shocking, but I think that was the point in the game where I was reminded like, oh, there's a lot of highly strategic people who are doing a lot of things without my knowledge.
Yeah, no, definitely a wake-up call. And Jude,
Hmm.
you kind of are a part of this flip. We see there's this really interesting segment early on where Elena's sitting with you and she's like begging you basically. She's like, "Please, Jude, like we want to work with you, like I promise." Like, did you feel inclined to trust her, or was it really just like truly a selfish decision on your end?
It was an interesting experience because I think I filmed like 2 or 3 different confessionals with different directions I was gonna be going that week, actually. I was really pulled. I was really scared to go against Annika and Iman, but I really did feel like a little bit helpless in my game. I think there's a point where me and Dunker were talking. It wasn't filmed, but he was like, "Hey, any plans you want to do? Any strategy?" And I was just like, "I don't know, man. I'm not gonna win this. Like, it was nothing I can do at this point." I was just kind of motions were everywhere, everything. And then I think at one point I was like, I think I want to make a move, and I kind of sent a text to Elena, and I was like, I have to quickly send something that I can't go back on. That way, I'm forced to make this move because I was scared to. I was like, I don't know, it's not fun doing this. It's not fun betraying people. So I sent a text to Elena, and she responded, and I was like, all right, now we have to say something. But it was hard flipping my original alliance, honestly, because I did feel like we formed such a strong bond, as you might see with the Annika and Iman's reactions to that later on. But I definitely think it was more of a selfish action because I definitely realized that I was not going to win with these people in the game. I need to move on with people I can win with, and I was very hesitant to make this action. Elena did a fantastic job of convincing me. She really kind of pulled the strings. I wanted them to play the idols. I wanted it so I remained hidden still. My betrayal was not seen, but it was very much like she convinced me to flip. So props to
Mm.
her.
Yeah, no, super interesting dynamic, honestly. Like all these idols in play. We get this really good confessional segment from Iman where he's talking about how he knows where like all the idols in the game are, which is really interesting, and that knowledge doesn't really ultimately end up benefiting him very much at all. But yeah, Karina, did you have a take on that?
Yeah, I what I find interesting is I think like I can't remember where exactly I saw this. Maybe it was in a confessional, but Iman had basically said that in a scenario where both like what Jude would have wanted to happen there, where both Ryan and Elena play their idols, Iman said that he would play his idol too. So if you guys had put the votes on him, there would be a scenario where everybody who was voted for would be immune. So I'm like so curious, like what would have happened in that scenario? Like, would you guys, Jude, would you have voted for Annika? Like what would you do?
I mean, if that's after a revote, you mean? Because the votes are being casted.
Yeah, it would have had to be a
Yeah.
revote.
So,
Yeah.
honestly, at that point, like, I would have probably had to vote Monica. There's no going back from there. I mean, they would have seen my handwriting. Who did it? Who did it? Maybe I could have played it off because you didn't see my vote, actually. You only saw Dunker's vote. And I could have been like, oh my gosh, Iman, I had no idea that happened. But I don't know. I was kind of eager to kind of cut the BS, kind of get over like the whole lying thing. 'Cause I just felt like it cleared the air a lot easier. So I
Yeah.
probably would have gone off to Annika at that point.
I mean, that's
If
definitely
if if all of the votes were like nullified, I think we would have read all of them to show
Yeah,
does
no
not count, so
choice.
that there wasn't any
Yeah.
ambiguity. Yeah. But I know on production we certainly would not have been prepared for a full like vote
no.
count reset, everyone
That been
immune.
fun to watch.
Yeah, it would have been interesting for sure. Well, okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's definitely a jump to get over. You know, you had already snaked your people once, right? But like it was clear that those people didn't really have your best interest, while this time like you'd more built bonds with these people in another way. So
Yeah.
yeah, harder to turn. I certainly understand.
Definitely was. I was talking to people every single day. Annika must have called me at least 3 times a day. Like we're really good friends, honestly.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
hard. It was a hard
Yeah.
choice.
No, it's definitely a move, like you said, where you can't really go back once you start to make it.
No,
Well,
As soon as you came with the purple shoes, there was
I
really
know.
no undoing it.
this is true.
I probably shouldn't have done that. That was probably a dumb move. Iman said he noticed that after the vote, and I was like, oof.
I mean, it didn't matter. He was already gone.
It was too
It's
But
late.
true.
Yeah.
let's jump into the
True.
double. This is a really interesting dynamic that we start to see here, and I think like watching the episode for me was really interesting because there was also some that like I wasn't really privy to. Like I remember being in the room with Lena and Annika, and not being aware that literally the doves were like standing in a circle outside, just like basically deciding what was gonna happen. Like that's crazy. But I want to talk about the immunity. Lena, I remember you banged your knee right? Like that was why you were upset, right? Or was it truly just like really overwhelming emotionally?
I think like the catalyst for it was definitely me just like actually physically hurting myself. But I do think like emotions were so high that night. And even if I myself was like not that pressed about being voted off, like it was okay. I was okay with me. I'd come to terms with that. Just like seeing the stress of Annika and just all of that back and forth, like it definitely made me a little bit emotional too. So I think it was a combination of factors going on.
Yeah, I mean, Annika was really upset. I mean, right, it was like the first time that things really actively didn't go her way, and like there were high likelihoods that things could have gone against her earlier in the game, and so it seemed like she'd really fought to get to the place that she was in, and so to lose such a close ally, is certainly shocking, especially when she felt like she was building relationships. But I think, Lena, you make really great points when you're trying to comfort her, saying like, well, weren't we lying to everyone too? Right. Like I think like you
Yeah.
articulate that really, really well, being like, we kind of did the same thing, to be honest. But yeah, like once you were vulnerable at that point, right? You lost immunity. What was kind of your mindset? Like, did you think it was gonna be you? Did you think it was probably gonna be Annika? Like, what was your perspective there?
Yeah, I was pretty confident that it was gonna be me. I not don't remember if this was included, but I think there's a point where I'm talking to Annika where I'm like, I literally say, like, it's okay, it's gonna be me who's voted off, not you. So in that moment, I like kind of was like, there's nothing I can do to save myself. I don't have an idol, even if like people are suspicious that I do. I know that I don't. Like, there's no way to save myself now. And I know people were concerned. My strategy was just to like win every challenge until the end, just keep having immunity. And I know people were concerned about that actually happening. So I think I was just like, hey, it was a good run. My time here, it's gonna be over. There's not really much I can do.
Lena,
But
one of my favorite.
I wanted Annika to, I also kind of felt like if between us, I wanted to go because I wanted to see like her last fight. Like I felt like it was only right that she stay and,
Mm.
go out with a bang.
Lena, one of my favorite moments that didn't make the cut of the episode, I think it was a lot later into Annika's sort of like ranting, was, she was talking about like how just unfair that this blind side was, and how like she and Iman and Nia and Lucas all cared so much about this game, and how like messed up it is that they're, out. And you just go, that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. And I remember just like everyone, all of production sort of like looking at each other like, is that the episode title? Like, is that
Yeah, I
it?
remember you
Uh,
saying that, and then I saw that it wasn't the episode
I
title.
was
I was
not in the
very
room for
upset about
Goodbye
that.
Camp. In my defense, I was not in the room for that.
Goodbye Camp was so iconic. Oh my God. That makes sense that it's the
It
title.
was
I'm
truly a
for it.
moment in time, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think you had a really mature perspective on it, being like, look, like, she was like, none of these people played until like literally today, like and you were like, well, that was their strategy. It was smart, like I think you were very perceptive in that way, and like kind of able to see that larger view of the game, which I really respected about you
Mm.
Well,
as
thank
a
you. But I
player.
do also I like respect Annika for her commitment to the game
Oh, of
also.
course.
And
Yeah.
like the fact that she was able to get so invested in this is like kind of a beautiful thing to me. So like even if her reaction was like seems extreme to some of us, like I I still support her and like
Oh,
Yeah.
go
totally.
Annika. Like she was putting her heart and soul into this and
Yeah.
I respect that.
No, I've absolutely been there in the thick of the emotions. I just thought like the duality of you two was really interesting, where she was like, seeing the unfairness, and her passion was really showing, while you were kind of showing this like broader perspective, especially as someone who like you said, you had a very limited like knowledge of Survivor, right? And so your ability to kind of have
Extremely
that
limited.
perspective,
Same.
at the same time, I think like holding both of those like perspectives in the same room, and the different energies, and like it really being between you two, was super interesting. Jude, I want to go to you to talk about this vote before I jump to Lena, because she has to jump, and then we'll circle back to jump more into the
Yeah.
episode. But yeah, Jude, why ultimately was it Lena rather than Annika?
It's a little bit harsh, not gonna lie. But Lena obviously was killing it in the challenges, and it felt like a golden opportunity to get her out because we don't know when the next chance she would be vulnerable again, honestly. She was a fantastic player, and I still think so. You killed it. And it
Thank
was
you,
very,
Jude.
we're also kind of scared of you having the idol. That was big talks. We had no idea that Mr. Iman had the idol, went home with it in his pocket. So we were very scared of Lena. So we figured we could at least flush out the idol and then attack Annika as well if we split our votes up and then get a redraw or the revote. So that was the kind of thought process. And on top of which, we were like, if Annika stays in, there's a good chance she's not going to be as competitive or do as well because she's kind of going through a rough spot. So we saw her a little bit less of a what's it called?
A threat, maybe.
Threat. Thank you. That's what I was
Yeah.
looking for. Threat.
Yeah.
So that's definitely where our
No,
thought processes went.
she was definitely polarizing at that point in Lena. I think you were like people really liked you, you know, on a social level. And so
Yeah.
I think that could have been
I'm
part of
glad
it.
to hear that.
Yeah, I think, you know, with Annika, people were like seeing her reactions and they were like, you know, the frustration I think was mutual, I think, on both ends. Before we jump to you, Lena, for like player of the episode and things, we have a little
Hi.
guest saying
Just want to say hi to everyone. This episode was so much fun. I'm so jealous you got to do this episode. So hi, good to see everyone.
The president, the man himself. But yeah, so Lena, we do every episode, player of the episode. Right now, the count is pretty long at this point. So I won't read through all of it as this is the 9th episode. But I'm curious in your perspective who the player of the episode was.
Could you clarify what you mean by player of the episode?
Yeah, like who had like the like strongest episode, maybe like setting themselves up hypothetically the best in the future, or like you know, you think they like made really smart decisions for their game. Yeah, without revealing anything about like the future of the game.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I think as you were talking about earlier, I think Ryan's arc in this episode was one of the most interesting. I mean, obviously there were people who made like flashier displays as we see in Goodbye Camp later on. But I think Ryan's arc in the episode is the most interesting because like you said, he now is in like a completely different position than he's been in the entire game and is more of a top dog rather than kind of someone who's being dragged along. So that's who I would say is player of the episode. In retrospect, I wish I would have handled that clue situation a whole lot better. But props to Ryan for pulling himself up by his bootstraps.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's a great pick. Let's actually we can jump to player of the episode now, I think. Jude, do you want to go next?
Yeah. I think Elena. I think she really directed me. Like I came to her, saved her, but she really kind of decided what path I was going, where it was going to happen. I wanted the votes or the idol he played, and as Karina said, that would have not turned out well for anyone. So I think she directed it very well, and she was very convincing. Like she was really good. So like props to her, honestly. I think she did a really good part of making a best for a bad situation and directing the votes the way she wanted to.
Eli, what about you?
I mean, it's tempting to say Jude, obviously, because I think this is another situation like with the Kelsey vote where like you saw your options and possibilities in this game, you know, like Vince talked about, and like knew that flipping was your best option to get to the end. But I think I'm leaning a little bit more towards Dunker because I actually think without Dunker being involved in this vote, um, it won't happen, right? Without having a fourth number in Dunker, like the plan would have to be for Elena and Ryan to play their idols. Iman would have played his idol. The whole plan would have probably fallen apart. Plus, Dunker winning the challenge in the double like is crucial because if he didn't, then like obviously nobody knows that Iman went home idle in pocket. And so even if they wanted to vote you out, if Annika won the challenge, if they wanted to vote you out, Lena, like they would have had to split votes onto one of the other doves. It would have been like, I think a lot more of a mess if Dunker didn't come in to the vote and also win that challenge. So I think he's my player of the episode.
Karina, what about you?
No, I'm gonna give it to Jude.
Oh,
Sorry.
really?
I just
Okay.
genuinely, I don't think Dunker's like gameplay was really like I know that, like, yeah, the way it worked out, like, you would have had to split with Dunker as well. But I also just think that, like, I don't know, that whole conversation, like, the way Dunker went about flipping, I feel like could have been cleaner. And I feel like Jude, like, made the same move, but, like, in a much cleaner way. Like, Elena, like, probably would not have believed Dunker if he was like, you know, we're gonna flip. But she did believe Jude because
Doing it.
Jude had been putting in the work to make this happen. And I know that, like, Elena ultimately, like, convinces Jude to flip that vote, but I also think, like, Jude, you had the foresight of being able to be like, well, I'm not going to win against them. I have to flip now. And you had already, like, kind of been planting the seeds in the weeks leading up to it, to be able to flip. And, like, even though you completely betrayed Ryan and Elena's trust at the beginning of the merge, they trusted you enough at this moment. Like, I have to give it to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, honestly, like I think this was like a really great episode for, most of the people left. We totally see a power shift here. And I think like it's a really great play for everyone involved. I think I'm gonna agree with Lena here though and give mine to Ryan. I think like
Oh,
between him finding the idol and like finally getting his vindication of like getting Iman out, like I think that's huge for his game specifically. Like that was something like he had like needed personally. We have that really funny cut at the end of the episode, where he's like, "This is for calling me a bitch" in episode two. Like, so funny. But yeah, I think we see like a really strong episode for Ryan and like his game individually. I definitely do see merits for Jude as well, of course. I think like Iman leaving over Annika, right? Like Jude definitely had a stronger relationship with Annika, right? In that sense. But I think like Iman leaving was like specifically good for Ryan and his vindication in this season. Okay, before you go to jump, Lena, I want to ask you, what was it like for you to be like in the game, on the show, and what is it like watching it back? How has it like impacted you in your life?
Yeah, well, being on the show was super fun. It was an experience that I've never had, and I don't know that I will ever have again. Um, it was really interesting living in this constant state of like paranoia. Like I remember there was this one time where I went a couple days without like checking in with people because I just was like doing other stuff. And people were like, Lena's not checking in. She's talking to other people. She's doing this. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even like not think about this for a day. Otherwise, it's all gonna go downhill for me. So it was really interesting being in something like that. And watching it back, I was like fearful to even watch any of it because just watching yourself back is always like embarrassing. But it's just been really fun. It's been really interesting also to see all of the stuff you don't know was going on. And just seeing everyone else's like perspectives and like really advanced strategy. Like the brains of these people who are playing are incredible. Like the foresight people have, the ability to like stab people in the back, and it was just really impressive to see. So yeah, it was all great.
Awesome. And then like how has it impacted you, do you feel like, if at all?
Oh, um I guess it's made me like more prepped if I do have to, if I'm ever in a situation where I like really need to strategize and like form allyships and do it. I don't know. I feel now more adequately prepared to be a snake. So thank you for that. I haven't had to really use these skills yet, but I'm glad I have them, you know? It's
If
good to
Lena
have in
is
your
ever in,
pocketbook.
if Lena's ever in a Lord of the Flies scenario, she now knows what to do.
Exactly, Eli. Thank you for summarizing what I was trying to say. That's exactly what I think I've gained from this.
You're ready. You're ready. Yeah, I mean, you're like the way you approach the game, your adaptability, I think you really picked it up really quickly despite like, the overwhelm that maybe you started to feel in the end game. Like I think like because we like every season we have like a player or two who comes on the show who isn't really familiar with it. And I think at least of the players that I've seen personally, I think you've probably been one to pick it up the best. So I definitely wouldn't underestimate the way that you adapted to the game, and you crushed it in the challenges. And so it was awesome
That's
to
the
watch.
crutch that I was leaning on. I was like, okay, I can do a
Yeah,
challenge at least.
no, and you got it. You really did. But yeah, awesome to have you. You're welcome to stick around for as much as you're able to, but if you gotta hop off, totally awesome as well.
Okay,
Um,
great. I think,
but Karina,
oh,
Oh, no, go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think I'm gonna hop off, but it was great seeing you all, and thank you guys for
Yeah.
continuing the Survivor legacy at UCLA. It's awesome. So have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah, it was great to see you,
Good to
Lena.
see you,
Yeah.
Lena.
Bye, you guys.
Bye. All right. Well, so yeah, Karina, I want to jump to editing notes because I know you said you had some interesting things you wanted to discuss, and that it was like your favorite episode to edit. So please enlighten me, on the secrets.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like if I have like things to discuss this. Well, I guess I do because I'm talking. But I think like okay, the biggest thing for me for this episode was that there was like I feel like the amount of footage and the like way that the confessionals were taken was like really like there was a lot to do with like telling a story this episode, and it was like the first time where I've been like, whoa, like if this was like a real season of Survivor and I had a full editing team, like this would be like a crazy like episode to tell narratively. And I think like the biggest thing that really stood out to me was like Annika's arc throughout the season, like specifically like comes to a point here that I feel like highlights pieces of the game that a lot of people don't really consider. And a lot of it like doesn't make the edit. I'm one person, you know, like I can't do everything. But I just wanted to like talk a little bit about like what it's like to play Survivor while also being a person, a college student who has like a life and you have to do things. And something that I noticed specifically, and there were a lot of people like in the comments talking about like, I don't know, the emotions that come with this kind of thing. And like I think even during tribal council, it's like a moral dilemma in itself. Like, what do you do when somebody is this like torn up about something? And I think like you can kind of see in an earlier confessional that Annika is already like in a really intense mental space. And I think it was just like, you know, you're not used to being a person that's being sneaky and going behind people's backs and doing things like that. I'm sure like Jude can attest, like it's mentally, it's not a great experience. Yeah, and so then like you can kind of see like there's a confessional where she's like, I'm feeling the pressure of the game like a lot on me. Like what I choose to do is like the trajectory of everything. And you can see like it's an emotional moment for her. She also like mentions in other moments, like I have a 10-page paper due for one of my classes. Like, how am I supposed to be expected to like do this and also balance school on top of it and also everything else? And so I think like all of that added context really contributes to like this like downfall that happens after you get blindsided. Because like after they got blindsided with like Mia getting voted out, like, you know, they had a week to regroup and prepare and be able to like, okay, we're really upset. Like they had both, like Iman and Annika had both like thrown that challenge basically. Iman like says in a confessional, I threw it, and and Annika throws it so that she can have the knowledge is power. And then like immediately afterward, they're like, okay, regroup. How are we gonna like get Kelsey out here? And they managed to do it. Whereas this time around, it's like she's completely blindsided and she doesn't have that time to like recover emotionally from this after having like already a really stressful week. And it's like you can see in the fact that like Lena and Annika didn't even vote together. They're like, let's go vote. And Annika like is like, who are we voting for? Like she doesn't even know. And it's like, I feel like had you given them a week, like the pressure of a double, like really adds on to it too. Like there's so much that comes into like playing the game, being in that environment. It's like really intense and it has like major game impacts. Like I'm pretty sure if they had been given a week, like they would have been upset the first day, regrouped, and like been able to do like a 2-2-2. Everyone thinks that Lena has an idol, so you can use that suspicion to the best of your abilities, and maybe they could have weaseled their way out. But it was just like the intensity of the situation, I think, like really adds to it.
I think also like there's something to be said about the point in the game, right? So early on was when they lost Nia, right? And that wasn't even entirely like in their control, right? It was like they knew they were likely going into a tie scenario. They knew when they were going into a revo that there was a risk of losing a number, right? Like they knew they were in a hard spot there. And it was still relatively pretty early on in the game. Now, at this point in the game, you've gone, like, if you're Annika and Iman, you've gone through hell and back. You know, you had this really hard experience, and then you've been on the top. You felt like you've been in control, that you've been running it. And then all of a sudden, like the wool is completely pulled over your eyes, like you lose your number one ally, and now not only like is it late in the game and you're super emotionally invested in your success here, but like you don't have the time to take a step back and walk away and process it like you otherwise normally would. And so I think that is really interesting. I didn't even notice, I don't think, that they didn't vote together. Like who ends up catching the votes there?
Um, I think one of them votes Jude and the other votes either Ryan or
Yeah, Ryan.
Dunker. Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dunker had immunity, so it was Ryan.
No,
Um,
Annika flipped
but
me off in that one too.
I just wanted to also talk about like, correct me if I'm wrong, Karina. I mean, I was more involved in like uploading and collecting the footage than editing, but I believe there's also a confessional that didn't make the cut where before the vote, where Annika is like really torn up about having to write down Elena's name, because they had already formed some sort of bond throughout the game. And I think she's like almost in tears over it. And I think that really like shows how much like Annika was invested in this game, and like not just as like a snake, but as like as a player, and how hard it is to vote out those people close to you. And I think that also adds a little bit of context of like she is a player who is super emotional, and that's also I think what makes her very entertaining to watch. But here, like I understand, like having been torn up for so long about, oh my God, I have to blindside this person and write their name down, only for them to pull that on you first, and then like I would be frustrated if like, well, why did I spend all this time like crying over it, or like
Why did I
why was I
mourn it?
so
Yeah.
right, like um that you feel like you've been lied to, and like that level of betrayal can go a level
Mm.
further. So I get it. And I yeah, like you said, I think there are moments in the past where people have been blindsided, and then they just hold it together during the challenge, and then they go to their dorm and cry it out or whatever. But like she's going to tribal right after, and she was like this close to winning immunity. I mean, like on a bracket basis, Dunker like was paced so far ahead of everybody else that it I don't think it would have been close regardless. But like
But still,
she
yeah.
doesn't have that opportunity to emotionally process it on her own terms. And so like I understand it. And especially the fact that like because it's a double, we catch that all on camera. Like it's tough. I understand. And I think Karina, you did a good job of really like editing it in a way that I think, really shows like what's going down so people can like see it, but also like gives her a sense of like sympathy and like privacy. Like there was stuff that was cut out of there because we didn't need to see every single moment of somebody's mental spiraling. And so credit to you for that, Karina, also as well. I do want to add also, if there wasn't a double, we planned the doubles in advance. This is one where I actually kind of wish we didn't, like in hindsight, because Iman went home idle in pocket, so we would have actually replanted the idol, which could have totally like reshuffled the
I don't know
power
if we I
and
don't
what
know
could
if
have
we
happened
would
in the
have done
game.
that. I
Maybe
don't
not
think
at final six. I'm not sure, but it's
Mm.
possible. So I
because
agree. Like it could have had a totally different
it
outcome if it
wasn't the
wasn't a double.
merge idol, I don't know if we would have done that actually.
Mm.
But yeah, there's definitely like something to be said about having a double that late in the game is definitely intense and a choice. But when you're on the quarter system, and you want to finish your season in the quarter, this is
Can't fit enough votes in a 10-week quarter.
well, yes.
I'm so curious, like also, sorry, just I would love to bounce this question to Jude because
Oh,
like you were in the game and
yeah.
also Monica was not the only one who was very like emotional and torn up about this. There was a moment when you and Elena talked that Elena also became very emotional and like you kind of defended her later on. So I was just curious if you wanted to talk
Yeah.
about how like you betraying people like plays into the emotionality of the game, and then also like what you were observing because you were definitely at the center point of that. So I was like curious.
Yeah. I mean, I sent her a text and I go to her room and I think we both know what's going on. We both meet each other outside her room. It's like stolen faces. We come in her room and I kind of tell her and yeah, she's crying. Like it's emotional. She had that and she kind of tells me about this whole night how her and Anka spent together and we're watching this movie together and we really bonded, had a great time. And now that she knows this is that she's being betrayed, lied to the entire time was the emotional moment. And like that hurt me as well. Like I definitely did felt like that was really messed up, and I didn't want someone who's super nice like that to be going through that. And like, yeah, so I got upset, especially when later when Annika left and we kind of started talking about it. And I was like, she was lying to you too. Like it was like being a bit of a hypocrite a little bit, and I felt for her. I mean, it was a little bit easier to do this against Kelsey because she was saying things about me, and but this situation, I felt like it was a lot harder to sit there and watch someone get taken out, especially after hearing how they were being treated a little bit, and I got upset for sure.
I think it's really interesting how the framing of this season being moral dilemma really contributes to kind of some of the criteria and the conversations that end up being
Mm.
had, right? Because what you're talking about right now is like the personal like repercussions and like what
Yeah.
is moral in this game, right? Like that's really what we're talking about right now, which I think is so interesting and so compelling to see like how this theme kind of stretched beyond the mechanics that we were really able to implement, right? We put in like,
Yeah.
oh, these decisions are able to make, but at the same time, like looking back, it's like, we were talking about how much you weigh someone's emotions and how much you weigh loyalty. And that really is a question of morality, which I think is super interesting and honestly really
Yeah.
awesome that it's kind of developed this way. What
Oh,
On
about
I
the
agree.
on the topic of morality, I think I just wanted to mention how well I think this episode sort of like um closes or like reaches a pinnacle of Jude's arc throughout the season from a narrative perspective. I remember when I
you?
sat down to like talk about the season and this episode in particular with Karina, when we were going through footage, it was like
Yeah.
I described it as like, you start as like, the ultimate dove, you're like, I'm gonna be loyal, I'm a nursing major or whatever. And then with the Kelsey vote, you have this like, I think I said you have an Anakin Skywalker arc where you like turn to the dark side and you then become Darth Vader and you're like fully like with the snakes, turning all of these votes. And then this is sort of like this episode here is your Return of the Jedi moment where, I think Iman, who's sort of like been the sort of center of the snake alliances as a whole, right? And you take him and you throw him off the bridge, with
The
his
Emperor's
force
going
lightning and all
down.
that. And I just think like as an arc, for your development throughout the game, it's like very fascinating to watch. And I think it's what makes you just one of the most like exciting players to watch this season
Well,
because you're so dynamic and you're always like assessing what your best options are.
Yeah, I mean, I think
thank
we,
you.
we we really have that with a lot of players, right? I think in a lot of ways this is also like a point for Ryan, kind of like we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
He goes from being like super dovey to kind of having this like gotcha moment with Iman, where he kind of like he's still like in his moral alignment, but he kind of has a little bit more of like an evil moment. He's sneaky with the idol, as opposed to like really being like, this is how I believe I should vote because this feels right to me. And then like yeah, with Annika and Elena as well, we kind of have these like this like emotional build up and we kind of start to see them as people, especially here. And
Yeah.
oh, I forgot to bring this up earlier, but the moment where you see Donker tear up at his loved one visit, like that was so cute. Like it's like you have to watch, you have to catch it, but he like goes like this, he wipes his eyes when he brings his sister out. And he was on the podcast last week and he said that one of the most like meaningful parts of this experience for him was like going to the dining hall and talking to his sister about strategy for hours. And so like having that perspective and then also like seeing him get emotional over like his sister being brought out, I think was like really cute and like really adds meaning to that moment for me. So I think this is really like yeah, like a high point of the season for everybody. um but yeah, I mean, we have this great split vote, we have this overturn of power, right? The doves kind of get their power back and they coordinate, they're actually on the same page, they do this 2-2 situation and
It's
they're
so
like
brutal for Annika.
they're trusting each other. Oh, it's so brutal for Annika.
He'll
um
sit through another vote because they split the votes.
yeah, yeah,
I know, but that was part of the strategy as well. Like
It was
she was
smart. It
not
was
gonna
smart.
she
Yeah.
was not gonna it felt cruel, but we're trying to win.
yeah, no, it's this balance that we reach. But I really want to talk about going into the end game here, right? Because we've reached the final five at this point, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Lena was sixth. Like this is the end game, right? We're really reaching like finale territory. I want to hear from you guys about like again, obviously without spoiling anything. Um, like yeah, like what has the season been so far, heading up and like what is the arc? Like where do people stand heading into this finale before we wrap up? If anyone wants to start. And then
Yeah.
Karina will jump into confessional count afterwards as well.
I think I mentioned this already, but I think this season is really defined in sort of three big like chunks of power, right? In that like you get sort of the pre-merge, which I think is really the like doves have stability and they hold together and the snakes are falling apart, and that really flips at the Kelsey vote and then the Hannah vote, which like solidifies sort of the era of the snakes. And this is sort of then the next big power shift where the power is now in the hands of the doves. Obviously, as we go into the end game, it's not thinking nearly as much about what tribe do people start on, but like who's going to win and who's going to get
Yeah.
there. But you know, you look at where the numbers are, and it does sort of become the dove end game. I think like at this point, it is pretty clear that I think Annika and I would say Jude probably have the toughest paths to the end. And I think Ryan probably, despite having made, I think a pretty been part of a pretty big move in this episode, has the clearest path to the end because at final five, I think people are going to want to take out, you know, Jude, Annika, you know, maybe even Dunker or Elena before really setting their eyes on Ryan. So I think he is the clearest path to the end. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
all
I mean,
depends on who wins the last challenges.
yeah, I mean, everyone's a contender, I would say, really, at this point. You know, Dunker's had idol plays, right? He was gone, but like still, like his name was brought up, right? Like those idol plays were still intelligent and impactful. You know, Jude, you've
Yeah.
had this like morality arc and like been, you know, the biggest snake and yet like have had great success in this game. You've been able to regain trust with people that you've snaked at this point, right?
Yeah.
Then we have Elena and Ryan who've kind of been on this like dove arc, and then we have Annika who's been like through the ringer, right? Like I think everyone really has compelling stories at this point. Karina, I'm
It is
curious. Oh
Oh, it
yeah.
is really funny. I do remember filming a confessional with Elena, like right after Hannah was blindsided, where Elena was like, I'm gonna get Jude. I'm never gonna work with him ever again. I am gonna get him out of this game, mark my words. And then, you know, she was like, you know what, I'm kind of over it, and I think I'm actually gonna work with him for this vote. And I also think that's a testament to like the way that you were able to maneuver this vote,
And
that you
that's
were
why
able to
Jude's
get the
the
trust back.
player of the episode.
Oh, you're very sweet.
But it wouldn't have worked without Dunker. And he won. He did so well on that challenge.
We're sharing the love
Agree,
here.
disagree.
We're sharing the love. But Karina, I'm curious your take on the stories of this storied final thought.
I don't know. I think I'm gonna continue to give credit to your pace of the game commentary, which is just like ultimately what it comes down to is like moral dilemma. What pace are you playing at? I think I always like, and maybe this is like hindsight. I know what like the next couple seasons look like, as well. But like also talking about like new era and like what it's like to like have people who are really well versed in like survivor strategy play a survivor game, which is like, you know, ultimately you come to a point in the merge where you stop working in tribe like with your tribes and you start working in voting blocks to just take out the next biggest threat. And I think like ultimately you have a group of doves who like maybe aren't super well versed in like survivor strategy and are really just like we want to stick as a tribe, whereas the snakes are like ready to move into voting blocks, ready to start taking people out. There's like a moment where like Annika's like, why do we vote out Lucas, you know, because they were so like, okay, let's vote out the next biggest threat, whereas the doves are like, we're sticking together. And ultimately like that's the downfall, that the snakes could not match the doves pace of the game, and that's what kills them in the end. And like the doves come out on top and come back together, and I think that's like, I don't know, it's such an interesting like trajectory of like moral dilemma, snakes versus doves. How are you working strategically? How fast are you moving? What's your gameplay style? It all really clashes in the season. It's like if you can pinpoint what kind of player somebody is, you can kind of figure out like where are they going to fall back down again. That's super
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, a huge question this season really ends up being, I think, like how much do you value loyalty, right? Or what loyalty is most important to you, right? I think that becomes vital. And that piece of the play style, I think, becomes really important. And the way that the Doves are able to kind of catch up with this pace of the game, and they're able to kind of, like Annika kind of points out, and Lena in their conversation, like it's kind of a sneak attack. You know, no one's really like perceived that they're playing at this pace while they are on par with everyone else. And I think that timing makes this move especially impactful as we head into the end game. Jude, yeah, I'm curious, what were your thoughts at this point? Like what was you like in your head at that point?
At this point, I mean, over the course of the game, I think this game, the more dilemma game, because I was not well versed in Survivor at all. I seen like one or two seasons of this. I didn't really know the strategy going into this, but I feel like I wanted to play an honest game, which is kind of funny. Seeing how the snakiest snake. But it kind of pushed me. Like kind of had a little bit of an identity crisis because I thought I wouldn't be able to do certain these things, and I was like, oh, I guess push comes to shove, I can lie to people, I can stab them in the back, and that kind of was a little bit disheartening. But I think it kind of also just kind of showed everyone their true selves a little bit. No, no, needed some of that to work on, I think myself. But look at Ryan; he kind of stuck to himself, his values the entire time. And I respect that. So I think it just kind of shows you the values that people have and how important they are to them, and at what point, like they're willing to give up on them. And I think that was really seen through this season, especially for me. And like I think there's probably a lot of confessionals, Karina, which is very nice, didn't put them in, where I was just kind of freaking out. I was just I have no idea how I'm feeling. I'm back and forth. My stomach hurts by how upset I am for making these decisions. Like it was a lot of mental toll. And like I did not want to come and play another season of this. This is my but like I'm glad I did. It kind of pushed me. I think I grew as a person. I kind of did some self-discovery, and I think that was really awesome to come out this season. I'm sure a lot of people in the season can say the same thing as well.
Yeah, I think, there also becomes this really interesting question of, like Karina was talking about, we are real people. And so how much are you able to separate the game from your real life? And how much do you
Yeah.
want to? Right? Like you can step into the game and be like absolutely maniacal, but at the same, like at the end of the day, you are still a person, right?
Yeah.
Like where does that line get drawn, right? Like I've played orgs, for like ever, like most of my like teenage years and adulthood, right? And there are like ways where I like notice that it's affected me as a person
Yeah.
and the way that I like view the world, right? And so it's like, where is the line between the game and reality? Where is the line between your morals and oh, it's just a game and like, no, these are people's feelings. This is real,
Hmm.
right? That's a
And we
really real aspect, I think,
and
especially
we
when
did.
you're in college, you're living there, you are immersed in it.
Okay. And when you're down to the final six, you're seeing these people every single day, everyone meeting them so much, and you just talk about their lives. You get so well connected. Like even if you're planning against each other, you know their siblings, you know their parents, you know all about their lives, and it's so humanizing, and it really does feel like killing someone almost, and it's really painful, especially you get farther down, like you're saying. So sorry, go ahead.
UCLA, the Hunger Games.
It felt like that, at least for me.
Sunrise. Anyway, Karina, I want to jump to confessional count and do a little update as we jump into the final portion of the game here. Before we jump to the answer, I would love to hear guesses about who is leading and who is losing in confessional count right now. Eli, we can start with you.
Is this of who's still in the game? Because my guess is that Izzy is losing in confessional count.
I would say yeah. In
Okay, of who's still in the game? I think, oof, this is tough. I think Dunker is probably losing in confessional count just because there was a lot of times when he was like gone and we weren't able to get as much footage of him. Um, and then I think I'm gonna say it's probably Jude who's leading. I think it was Iman if I had to guess before, but now it's Jude.
I would guess either Jude or Annika leading at this point, and I would say probably Ryan, either of the Ryans, who I think are probably losing. Jude.
I think it was probably me leading at this point. I think Annika is kind of seen as kind of she's getting out taken out pretty soon, and probably Dunker at this point was probably the least because Ryan just found an idol at that point, and he was starting to get some of his groove back, and he wasn't really seen as a threat. So he's definitely making it to the end. Just gonna make a He'll make an like a argument for himself.
Karina, what do we got?
Yeah, so yeah, Dunker is definitely at the bottom. I think just like yeah, he was like missing a lot. I think also like he just played like very sporadically, so he sometimes like when he would film a confessional, he like really didn't know totally what was going on at that moment in time. So a lot of times the things that he was saying like weren't super usable. I will say like technically, I guess I was still counting this episode. Iman was still number one with 3.8 average, but yeah, second would be Jude. I think you had 3.44 per
That's pretty
episode.
good.
So yeah, pretty good. And then Ryan like has slowly been taking up more and more in confessional. So he's actually not the lowest. He was at 2.22, whereas it was actually Dunker and Lena who were tied for the bottom, which would be 2.1. And I think that was just
So
like again, Lena wasn't having a lot of strategic confessionals, so she didn't get a lot of airtime in the middle of the episode.
so then the only two that was Annika above Elena, or is it the other way around?
Oh, yeah, so Elena, oh my God, I can't read this, has 3.33 and Annika has 2.77. So yeah, Elena would be second.
Well, unless anyone else has anything else they would like to throw in. All right, we can wrap up. We will see you all next Sunday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you all so much for being here and for another fantastic episode of the After Show, and I'll see you all next week.